Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military with Summary channel, and in this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have a lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about Kiev because we had very interesting statement that was made by Andrei Sibiga, the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Russia did not respond to Kiev's ceasefire memorandum in Istanbul. That was stated by Ukrainian Foreign Minister. Russia did not respond to our document which sets out Ukraine's vision for ending the war. We sent it in advance of the meeting. During the meeting, our delegation asked the Russians what their thoughts were. They did not give any answer neither during the meeting nor after. We demand an answer from Russia. Every day of silence on their part justifies their desire to continue the war. And the Russian side put forward a set of old ultimatums that do not bring real peace closer. This contradicts Russia's previous promises, which were given in particular to the United States, that this week in Istanbul it would offer something realistic and feasible. He believes that the Istanbul format has turned into a meeting of the exchange of prisoners of war. And the most important statement, if the current meetings do not contribute to achieving peace, it becomes increasingly clear that a meeting of leaders is necessary. Most likely the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine was talking about a meeting between the President of Ukraine Zelensky, Donald Trump, and the President of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin. And the Russians made their own statement regarding the situation. A meeting between Putin, Trump, and Zelensky is highly unlikely in the near future, Kremlin spokesman Peskov stated, emphasizing that such talks would require prior technical arrangements. Another important updates are coming from the United States of America. According to information we have, the second person of Ukraine, Andrei Yermak, came with a visit to the United States of America, where he is going to talk about additional sanctions on Russia. Yermak came to the United States to complain about Russia and met with U.S. Special Representative for Ukraine, Keith Kellogg. We discussed the situation on the front, the results of the meetings in Istanbul, the importance of strengthening sanctions against Russia, and defense assistance to Ukraine. I said that Russia is doing everything to keep the fire going, and this should be put to an end by force, because Ukraine has done everything to stop the war. But if Russia does not cease fire, we are forced to conduct operations and destroy their military potential. That was stated by Yermak. But if you ask my opinion, I believe that Ukraine sent their delegation with the purpose to explain the United States of America, to explain the Senate, how exactly did it happen that Ukrainians use satellites picture U.S. technologies, satellite pictures of the United States of America, intelligence information of the United States of America to attack Russia airfields with strategical bombers and to destroy the most important civilian infrastructure. We're talking about bridges that were destroyed in Kursk and Bryansk regions during the previous weekend. Obviously, this is a very huge problem that Ukrainians are trying to find a solution right now. Now let's go to the Baltic Sea. Today we got additional reports. As you know, currently there are NATO exercises on the territory of the Baltic Sea, and the Russians started their own exercises as well. According to information we have, and according to my understanding of the situation, the NATO countries are trying to reinforce their presence in the territory of the Baltic Sea with the purpose, probably in the future, to carry out several special operations with the purpose to seize control over the Russian vessels. The Russians see the situation clearly, so that is why at the same time the Russians began their own operation, their own exercises, and the main purpose of the Russian exercises is to carry out several counter-attacks or counter-terrorist attacks with the purpose to restore control over ships and vessels in the Baltic Sea that could be taken or captured by terrorists. So the sources and the military experts are saying that this is a very difficult situation, because this situation can lead to probably some actions between NATO countries, NATO fleet, and the fleet of the Russian Federation. So let's wait and see what is going to be next, but obviously the summer in the Black Sea, in the Baltic Sea, is going to be very hot. Now let's go to the line of combat contact. We have lots of very interesting updates and details. And first we're going to talk about the Sumy direction, where the Russians continue their offensive operation and where the Russians another day in a row improved their positions and took additional territories. So let's discuss and let's first compare the maps. So this is the situation by the beginning of the 4th of June of 2025. Let's take a look at the map by the end of the 3rd of June of 2025. Just yesterday, the Russian sources reported that they managed to secure the village of Andreevka, and we had several reports, including reports from the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation. And yesterday, we got reports that the Russians answered the village Novokonstantinovka. And when talking about Novokonstantinovka, this settlement, today we adjusted the map in Russian favor, because not in Russian favor, but as a contested area, because we got additional proofs and additional confirmations. Furthermore, today the Russian sources published the video from the settlement of Vodolahye. So this is the video I'm talking about, and here we can see how exactly the Russians were attacking the settlement, how exactly the Russians were clearing this territory, forcing the Ukrainians to fall back. In lots of episodes, as usually, lots of destroyed vehicles, and of course, we have an episode with the Russian soldier that raised the Russian flag somewhere in the southern part of the settlement. Based on this video, we're not adjusting anything. We haven't adjusted anything, because we adjusted the map several days ago based on the report of the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation. But just now the Russians shown us the proofs as well. So the Russians are about to finish the battle for the first defense belt. There are, as we discussed, there are just 3 villages left in front of the Russians. We're talking about Varachne, we're talking about the village of Yablunovka, and we're talking about the village of Yunakievka. As for the village of Kondratovka, there are very heavy clashes, and the Russian source reported that there are still Ukrainians inside of the area, inside of the settlement, and that Ukrainians most likely control the southern part of this village. Anyway, the Russians continued their offensive, and today several sources reported that this morning the Russians answered the northern part of the village of Yablunovka, and the Russians are about to force the Ukrainians to fall back from this area. And most likely the Ukrainians would be forced to fall back further in the southern direction, because the Russians, as you can see, have established complete FPV drone control over the road NO7. During the previous 24 hours, the Russians published lots of videos how they were attacking Ukrainian vehicles and how the Russians were attacking Ukrainian drones, because to destroy vehicles is just half of problems that the Russians can face during offensive operation. The most important is to destroy drones, and it is very important to destroy those drones that Ukrainians may use to supply and support their forces. And during the previous episode we could see how the Russians destroyed the drone of Baba Yaga type that most likely was returning back to the positions of Ukraine after that drone brought some reinforcements and arms or food to Ukrainians along the line of combat contact. So no chances, supply lines completely captured by the Russians, complete fire control, nothing can move in the northern direction, and nothing can return from the village of Yunakievka back in the direction of Sumy. For complete control, we expect the changes on the ground in this area. Anyway, we see that the Russians are advancing, and the Russians are showing a very, big dynamic in this area. But the most interesting part of the Russian Sumy offensive operation is not, the progress on the ground from the Russian side. The most interesting part to me is the situation in the area of Tyotkina, where the Ukrainians from their side continue their offensive operation. For example, we can calculate the distance between the area of Russian offensive operation, in the vicinity of the city of Sumy, and the area of Ukrainian offensive operation in the area of Tyotkina. So the distance between these two areas is around 30 kilometers. Once again, the Russians are advancing in the direction of Sumy, and the Ukrainians from their side are trying to take under complete control the settlement of Tyotkina. And this is very strange, because neither the Russians nor the Ukrainians are doing anything to stabilize the situation on both directions. So the Russians are not sending their troops in the area of Tyotkina with the purpose to, stop Ukrainian offensive and to force them to fall back. The same situation we don't see from Ukrainian side. The Ukrainians are not sending their forces from this area in the direction of Sumy with the purpose to stabilize the situation here. When talking about Ukrainian attempt to attack, we continue receiving different updates about the units that are involved in this operation. For example, the Ukrainians with the units of the 33rd Assault Regiment are attacking the Russians in the area of Tyotkino from the southwest. And according to information we have, during the previous 24 hours, the units of the 33rd Assault Regiment of the Armed Forces of Ukraine managed to improve their positions on the Russian side of the railways. So additional buildings were taken by Ukrainians. Furthermore, according to information we have, the units of the 225th Assault Regiment managed to improve their positions to the east of this settlement of Tyotkino and Popovo-Lizachi. So we're talking about these territories. And these territories used to be considered as a gray zone, as you can see, but today, according to reports that we got from 225th Regiment and according to this geolocation, we have adjusted the map. In this video, we can see how Ukrainians were clearing the territory around these three lines. So this stronghold was geolocated exactly in this place, and here we can see how Ukrainians were clearing one stronghold after another, how the Ukrainians were moving along the trenches and so on. So based on this video, we have adjusted this map. And furthermore, several mappers reported that units of 225th Regiment managed to improve their positions in the direction of the settlement of Zarya. So these 2-3 lines were taken by the Ukrainians according to different mappers. And we have also the units of 125th Assault Regiment of Skala, and according to information we have, this regiment is trying to improve their positions to the south of the settlements of Veselaya Bukhovka in the vicinity of the villages of Novy Put and Krasnooktyabrski. But when talking about this area, we just have reports from Russian side that Ukrainians suffer losses, but we don't have anything that can confirm, let's say, additional progress on the ground from the Ukrainian side. So once again, the Russians and Ukrainians are attacking each other almost at the same front line, but without any attempts to stabilize the situation. So it's very interesting because sooner or later both armies would be forced to begin close combat, most likely somewhere in this area, in the vicinity and around the villages of Yastribina and Rikhi. As we discussed in the previous video, the Russians, after they finish the battle for the next defense layer, most likely will turn their offensive in the western direction to attack Ukrainians in Belopolye, basically from behind. And then most likely these two armies will face each other, will see each other face to face. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Sivers direction where the Russians continue their offensive operation. Almost every single day we are receiving more and more videos of how the Russians are destroy and attack Ukrainian positions around the village of Serebryanka, Grigorovka, and the most important, between the settlement of Siversk and Verkhnykamenskaya. So, and when talking about the city of Siversk, almost every single day we got another video how the Russians attacked and destroyed another stronghold or temporary deployment point. In this video we can see how the Russians, as a result of attack with the FAB 3000 or ADAP 1500, managed to damage or even destroy another building that Ukrainians used for the temporary deployment point. A bit further in the southern direction we have lots of videos how the Russians with FPV drones were attacking Ukrainian positions in the southeastern part of the settlement. And we have another video along the road between the settlement of Ivano-Daryevka and the village of Verkhnykamenskaya. Here we can see how the Russian units were attacking Ukrainian strongholds in this area, trying to clear these roads with the purpose to ease the further progress of the Russians. So as for now, we see that the Russians are doing everything they can with the purpose to prepare the city of Siversk for offensive, but as for now, they are still very far from this. First, they need, as we discussed, to take under complete control this road between Verkhnykamenskaya and Ivano-Daryevka. This will allow the Russians to improve their logistics, and only after the battle for this road the Russians would be able to start advancing further in the western direction. Obviously the battle for Siversk is going to start very soon, but probably not in the months of June, or probably maybe if it starts in June, then let's say almost in the end of the June. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the southern Konstantinovka direction, where the Russians are about to take under complete control the Kliban-Byksky pocket. During the previous 24 hours, according to information we have, the Russians continued their offensive operation and managed to improve their positions. At least the Russians managed to improve their positions along the western flank. This is the situation on the western flank by the end of the 3rd of June, and this is the situation by the morning of the 4th of June. The Russians took under control all these tree lines and fields, and we have proofs. In this video we can see how Russians were attacking this territory using vehicles, infantry fighting vehicles and tanks, how the Russians were moving through the fields in the direction of Ukrainian positions, how the Russians were attacking Ukrainian forces, how the Russians were landing their infantry, and many other different episodes exactly from this area. Based on this video we have adjusted the map because the Russians took under control these tree lines, and we colored these territories under complete Russian control. Furthermore, several pro-Russian resources confirm this information as well. So we see that the Russians are not going to stop their offensive operation from the southwest and from the west of the settlement of Yablunovka. On the other side, on the other hand, the Russians intensify their activities with the purpose to get as close as possible to the villages of Yablunovka, Alexandra, Kalinovo from the southwest. Every single square kilometer in this direction means more chances for the Russians to cut and cauldron the Ukrainians in the rest of the Kliban-Byksky pocket straight to the south of Reservoir itself. Furthermore, the Russians continue their offensive from the village of Zarya, yet we haven't received, let's say, 100% proofs that the Russians established control over this territory, but now it becomes clear that most likely the Russians will try to cut and cauldron the Ukrainians who are currently located in this area. We're talking about the villages of Shcherbinovka, Novospassky, Kliban-Byk, and Katerinovka. The Russians will be able to do this when they finish the battle for the western and the southern parts, the central parts of the Kliban-Byksky pocket, by advancing from the southwest in the northeastern direction. So this is the situation in this area. When talking about the N32 road, we haven't received anything special. Most likely the front line was stabilized in this area as a result of, let's say, additional forces that were brought by the Ukrainians in this area. The Russians now use lots of drones, lots of equipment to attack Ukrainian positions, but as you can see, without any changes on the ground. And the same story we can see on the South Donetsk direction. The Russians are getting closer and closer to the village of Kamar, but as we can see, without any changes on the ground. And that's it for today. For the short video, Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching, subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.